This
So
conference will now be recorded.
Continuing with Chelek Dalid, Part 4, Chapter 7, and which is Avodah Zmanit, the temporary or the periodic, the time-based observances, and we're up to paragraph 5, paragraph Hey. So last time we discussed Shabbos, V'amnam Gazra Chachmel Yonah, the divine, the supreme, highest wisdom decreed, Lahosif Yisroel Kiddush al Kiddush, to give us sanctification upon sanctification, meaning other sanctification in addition to the Shabbat weekly sanctification. V'nata lahem yemei kodesh milvad Shabbat, and we're given days of holiness besides Shabbat. Shebehem yikablu Yisrael madregot mimadregot hakiddush, that on these different days we will receive different levels, madrigal levels, right? Madrigal actually steps in modern Hebrew. We'll understand, we'll attain different levels of this kiddush, of this sanctification. Amnam, however, kulam, all the other days, as we'll see in a moment, are lamata mimadregat hashabbat. They are all lower than the madrega, the level of Shabbat, hashba'ato in terms of its influence, and kiddusho, and in terms of its holiness, right? Shabbat exerts a certain influence, and this will be lesser than that. V'hine, behold, kafi madregat hashba'atam. Now we can even see you, Robin. We just still okay. Do you hear me over the computer now? Just on the phone. Okay. V'hine, kafi madregat hashba'atam shalim ma'ela, according to the level of the hashba'ah, of the influence of the divine inspiration that comes down. Kain hutzrachnu linatek mina esek olami. So, commensurate to that, we'll have to detach ourselves from our involvement in this world. We discussed that on days where there is this tremendous heavenly influence, so we need to abstain, to lift ourselves out from all of the earthly, worldly, material, physical involvement. So according to the degree of the kedusha of the holiness, that will determine how much we need to have this nituk, this separation from our worldly involvement. And therefore there will be varying levels of abstaining from doing malacha. The different, on Shabbos is 39 malacha, we'll soon see. V'hainu, Yom HaKippurim, Yom Kippur is lamala mikulam, is higher than all of the other Yomim Tovim, but lesser than Shabbos, keep in mind. Yom Kippur is less than Shabbos, right? That's what we said in the paragraph above. Kulam lamata mirajagat Shabbat. They're all beneath the Shabbos madrega. But amongst those of the holidays that are beneath Shabbos, the apex, the highest of those days, is Yom Kippur. Va'acharehem, and after that comes Yamim Tovim, all the other holidays. On the other holidays, we also abstain from doing malacha. However, that which relates to food preparation, that can be done on Yom Tov. Va'acharehem, after that comes Cholo Shel Moed, Chol HaMoed, where we have the elements of those intermediary days of Passover, of Pesach, or of Sukkot. We have still elements of the Chag. We're still eating matzah and not eating chametz. We're still in the sukkah. We're still shaking our lulav and etrog. But there are still some abstentions from malacha. But in terms of driving, electricity, and all that, it does not apply. After that comes Rosh Chodesh. Even every Rosh Chodesh also has its hashpah, but it is a diminished hashpah influence, and therefore the abstention that that we need to have on that day is diminished. It's only women who will abstain from doing certain malachot on Rosh Chodesh. The Achel calls that Chanukah, Upurim, and then comes Chanukah and Purim. she'ein ben bitul malacha, where there is no abstaining from doing malacha. Ella, rather, what is there? Hoda'ah, we give our thanks on Hanukkah, right? We have our Hallel. V'simcha gan kein b'Purim, and on Purim we have a special rejoicing, a special happiness. V'chol zeh kefi erech hashefa hanishba, and all of this is aligned, proportional with the shefa hanishba, with the shefa, the influence that is showered down or availed to us. Va'or hameir hahu, and the spiritual light, ha'or, the light, hameir, that illuminates hahu, those days, in their own special way. So it's fascinating to realize that the abstention of malacha that we do and varying levels of that is all proportional to the shefa, this light, the spiritual light that is there. That in order for us to bask in that, there needs to be a certain nituk, a certain disconnect from all of our worldly involvement. Vi'ulam, paragraph 6. Milvad ha-kiddush hazeh, besides this kiddush, this sanctification, hanishar, which is assessed, b'madregotav, its levels are assessed, kafi madregat kedushat hayamim, according to the level of the kedusha of the holiness of that day. Yesh od inyanim pratiyim miyuchadim l'chol zman mizmanim ela kafi inyano. Besides that, there also is certain particular aspects that are particular to that time of the year, each one according to what it is. Let's hear the shoresh, and we'll soon go through those. The shoresh kulam, but the root of all of it is huseder shesidra hachachma elyona. This is this cycle, this order that God established. Shekol tikun shenitkan, v'or gadol, any great rectification, and any great illumination, sheheir, which illuminated, which lit up, bisman me'azmanim, at a certain particular time in our history, bishuv to kufat hazman hahu, when that season returns, Ya'ir aleinu or me'ena or harishon. There is illuminating for us light, which is similar to that first light. So it wasn't just there was this great illumination of freedom and of casting off different restraints that happened when we left Egypt, but that light then returns every year on that date of the 15th day of Nisan. So then it returns. As we always say, Jewish time, Jewish history is not one point going out, but it is cyclical. It's a cycle, and we keep coming back. And that great light that was illuminated when we left Egypt, when we stood at Mount Sinai, that comes back every year at that time. So we re-enter, we revisit that, and we once again are able to take in and bask in that light. U'techudash toledet hatikun hahu b'mi shekiblo. Right? And once again, there is this renewed rectification, or the toledet, the results, the impact of that tikkun, b'mi shekiblo, to those who are. Oh, I hear you, Robin.
Yeah, I can hear you now through the computer. I just pressed something with speakers and it worked, and so you can turn off the phone.
Good. So we're off the phone now.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Okay. B'mi shekiblo. If someone, and just remember what you did this time, Robin. So next time we don't have to go through this.
Probably won't.
B'mi shekiblo, for someone who is there to accept it, right? It's available every holiday. but it's got to be, we need to open ourselves up in order to accept it, in order to receive it. V'hinei, and let's see some examples. Al pizen nitztavinu b'chag haPesach, and therefore on the holiday of Pesach, of Passover, we are commanded b'chol ha'inyanim shenitztavinu, in all of those things which were commanded, l'zecher yitziat Mitzrayim. They're all being done in order to remember the Exodus from Egypt. Ki biyot hatikun ahu tikun gadol ma'od shenitkanu bo, being that rectification was a tremendously impactful, shenitkanu vo, that we were tikkund, rectified, changed as a result of that. As we mentioned, Kamosha Zachanu Lamala, Hukva, it was established, Shebeshuv to Kufat Hazmanahu, when we return to that time period, every year, the 15th day of the month of Nisan, for the next 7 days, Ya'ir Aleinu Or, there will be shining upon us this spiritual light, Me'ein Ha'or, the same Or Sheheir Az, right? Me'ein, parallels they put over here, that same light that shone then, that led to the Exodus from Egypt, that same light shines on us when we return to that time period. U'techudash banu toledet oto hatikun, and there is now renewed in us the result of that illumination, of that rectification, of that impact. Al-Kain, and therefore, in order to make ourselves the kli, the vessel, to receive that, nitchayavnu ba'otam ha'inyanim kulam. So in order to avail ourselves to all that, we have all of those mitzvot, all of those commandments of Pesach that avails us to receive that Pesach influence that returns each and every year. V'al derech zeh chag haShavuot, and in the same manner we have the holiday of Shavuot, that the same availability of Matan Torah, of the Torah being given, that took place on the 6th day of Sivan, or the 50th day after the Exodus from Egypt, so too every year on that 50th day we've got that same influence to those who open themselves up to it. The Chag HaSukkot. Now, whereas Pesach is specific to a date, the 15th of Nisan is when we left Egypt, and Shavuot is specific to a date. On the 6th of Sivan is when we received the Torah. The holiday of Sukkot is not specific to a date. It is the celebration of the Ananei HaKavod, of the clouds of glory that surrounded us during those 40 years that we were in the Midbar, in the desert, on our way to the land of Israel. So the Chag HaSukkot, Le'inyan, in regard to the Ananei HaKavod, in regard to those clouds of glory, Af al pi she'eno oto hazman bifrat, even though it's not specifically that day or that week of Sukkot that we have. The day of Sukkot is holiday, and then we have our 6 days Torah level of Chol HaMoed. So even though it's not specific to that time in particular, Ela shekava Torah, but the Torah established, God established Chag Zeh, this holiday, Lezichron, as a remembrance of Inyan Zeh, right? Of this idea, this concept, this phenomenon of the Ananei HaKavod, of the clouds of glory. Ukamosh Katuv, as it says, Kibusukot Shavti, and therefore that hashba'ah, that influence, that illumination that was there from the Ananei HaKavod, that is focused and that avails itself and impacts us during these 7 days of Sukkot. So that is the way that we make ourselves this kli, this receptacle that is able to receive all of this. And on a lower level, v'chein Chanukah, v'chein Purim. Once those were incorporated into our yearly calendar, that means that that cycle, they are part of the yearly spiritual light cycle. And that which took place on Hanukkah avails itself again to us during those 8 days of Hanukkah, the 25th of Kislev and on. And that which availed itself during the holiday of Purim, the miracle of Purim during that year, towards the end of the 70-year Babylonian exile, that comes back to us each and every year. We actually sing that in the Ma'oz Tzur song that we sing on Hanukkah. We say, B'nei Vina Yemei Shmona Kavu Shir Urananim. B'nei Vina, those who have that Vina, that understanding. Yemei Shmona, 8 days. Kavu, they established as Shir for song Urananim and praises. What is the idea of the B'nei Vina? The B'nai Vina, those who have that insight, meaning those who are able to sense that spirituality had returned the next year, they established that this should then become a holiday. Because we have different events, but the question is, have those events become part of the heavenly cycle calendar that those orot, that those lights will illuminate again at that time? That's why there are different opinions when it comes to the Yom HaAtzmaut, Israeli Independence Day, meaning there are those who view it as July 4th for Israel. It's a happy day, and instead of shooting firecrackers, we bop each other on the head with a bopper. That's what we do on Yom HaAtzmaut. And others say that no, this is part of our calendar. There is a certain Kedusha that returns every year at that time. That's the question. Does it have a real significance, religious significance, spiritual significance, or does it have national? Does it just have national significance? And it is interesting to note that we have our 3 regalim, the 3 pilgrimage holidays, and we have 2 rabbinic holidays. And we're still waiting for the 3rd full rabbinic holiday. We have Hanukkah, which was the rededication of the Mishkan, of the Beit HaMikdash, after it had been defiled by the Assyrian Greeks. And that corresponds to Sukkot, where we have the Anei HaKavod, the clouds of glory, and that actually began after we had lost it with the sin of the golden calf. That began anew with the start of the building of the temple, so of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, I should say, in the desert. So Hanukkah aligns with Sukkot, and Purim, the Gemara tells us, is that we re-accepted the Torah me'ava, out of love. And therefore, Purim aligns with Shavuot, with the time that we stood by Mount Sinai and received the Torah. The Gemara, the Pasuk says that we stood tachtit hahar. Simple meaning is at the foot of the mountain. But the literal meaning, tachat hahar, means what, Robin? Under the mountain.
Yeah.
So the sages say that Hashem held the mountain over our heads and said, accept it, otherwise there will be your burial place. And the way it's normally understood is that it was not that literally the mountain was lifted over our heads, but there was such an overwhelmingly clear revelation that we didn't really have free choice at that point to accept or not. So the Gemara then asks, well, if we were forced into it, So then how is there accountability, right? If I chose to accept something, then I'm held accountable. But if it was imposed upon me without my having a real choice, so then is there really true accountability? And the Gemara says, yes, but in the time of Purim, Kimu v'kiblu ha-Yehudim. So they reestablished that which they had accepted in the past. Purim is when we re-accepted it all, me'ahava, not out of this compulsion, but rather we accepted it all out of ahava, out of love. So Purim aligns with Shavuot. What's left? Pesach. Pesach is the time of our redemption. When will there be a full rabbinic holiday that everyone will accept? That it's not simply, there won't be any question, is it of religious significance? Is it only national significance? That will be at the time of the ultimate geula, of the ultimate redemption. And that was when we'll have a rabbinic holiday that will be fully mirroring that of Pesach, of redemption. Will it be on Tisha B'Av? Perhaps, right? That is called a Moed, and the pasuk in Zechariah, the famous pasuk in Zechariah, speaks about how the fast of the fifth month of the fourth month, of the fifth month, of the seventh month, and of the 10th month. Those are all the different fast days that we have, all about the destruction. Right? We have the siege being set on Tevet. We have the walls being breached on Tammuz. We have the temples being destroyed on Av, and we have the death of Gedaliah and the remnant of Israel, almost all of them having to flee. That's right after the day after Rosh Hashanah. So those days will turn from days of mourning into days of celebration. But right now we have two not indisputed rabbinic holidays, and they will have their light that returns every year. It's a different type of light. It's a lesser light, and therefore we don't have the prohibition of malacha, of doing work on those days. Now, there actually was something called, that the Talmud discusses, something called Megillat Ta'anit. The Megillah, the scroll of Ta'anit, of fasts. And that was a series of days, some of them celebratory days, and some of them sad days. It was all called Megillat Ta'anit because not that we were fasting on a celebratory day, but on those celebratory days, we were not allowed to fast on that day, nor on the day before, nor on the day after. So this scroll that lists, and the Gemara goes through many of these different days that used to be celebration. The Al Derech Zeh, the last paragraph, and based on this, how you call Yemei, all those days that are listed in Megillat Ta'anit, they each had their influence, and they each had their yearly cycle, and we would return to it every year. Ela shenit batlu, but it became batel, right? It became annulled. They are no longer observed. And they shelo hayu Yisroel yicholim la'amod bahem, right? We have a general rule that a gezerah, a decree, is only made if rov Yisrael yicholim la'amod bo, if majority of the nation is able to handle it, right? But if it's too much for most of the people, so then we do not incorporate that, and it does not become fully accepted. And that's what happened over there. Shenit batlu. It became batel because Israel was not able to stand up by it. It was too much. The niftaru miyot osim, and therefore we became exempted from doing a zecher lahem, a zecher, a remembrance of sorts, lehit orurut or hameir, right? To then, right, to stimulate their original light, right? So therefore, so we lose out. Those lights are no longer, right? Those lights have become dimmed, and those potential tachanot, stations, spiritual stations in our yearly cycle, right? So now we just take the express train and we pass by all of those local stops, and we only make our stops at the biggies on Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Kippur, on Sukkot, on Hanukkah, on Purim, on Pesach, on Shavuot, right? Those are the stops that we make at the major stations, right? Some more major than others. And of course, Shabbat on a weekly basis, right? But the others that did exist, that they were being commemorated for a period of time, that we do not continue. And therefore, we don't do the acts of observance, and therefore we do not stimulate, lehit orurut, to stimulate, to arouse, or hameir, that illuminating light, the atah. And now, so that is the structure of the different periodic observances that we have. Ha'avodah zmanit, the periodic observances. We have Shabbos at the height, then Yom Kippur, then we have the other holidays, then we have Chol HaMoed, Rosh Chodesh, Chanukah, and Purim, and there were other days also which fell off along the way. But now we need to explain why it is that on Pesach, what is the link between that special illumination of Pesach that aligned with that will be eating matzah, not eating chametz. What is the special light of Sukkot that aligned with that special influence of Sukkot? It makes sense, of course, that where will we eat if not in a sukkah? And what would we shake if not a lulav etrog and hadassim and aravot? So how do these individual, right, Perek Shmini that will start next time is b'mitzvot hazmanim, the mitzvot, the seasonal commandments, the mitzvot that align particularly, specifically with those time periods, with the special light of Pesach. This follows with the special light of Sukkot, with the special light of Shavuot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, how each of those go ahead and align. Okay, good. So sorry for the late start today. Some of the technical issues that people of our age struggle with. If we had a few 8-year-olds, we'd be fine over here.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
alas, that is not the case. Okay, next Monday, actually, this is okay. Next Monday, I'm away. So the 13th and the 27th, I'm away. Okay? The 20th we will learn, but we'll need to start at 6 p.m. because davening is at 5:20. By the time we resume, then the 6th, the 27th, I'm away. The 6th is Purim. So when we resume again March 13th, we'll have changed the clocks. Mincha Marav will be at 6:35. So then we can go back. So it'll just be, we'll have a bit of a checkered schedule coming up. We're not on the 13th. We're on for the 20th at 6 p.m. 27th and 6th of March, we're off. And then 13th, we get back into our rhythm. And then that will be back at our 5:45 time period. Okay? But that will be in the emails that I send out. I will be sure to include all of that.
Great.
Okay. Good having you, Robin. Good having you, Dalit. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye. Have a good week.
Good week. Thank you.